And good evening. Welcome once again to Branco Broadcast. My name is Bob Branco. Good to have you here this evening. Our guest has been a very active person for a long, long time. Most of you are very familiar with him. And I'm going to present to you now Mr. Dennis Polselli, class of 1972 from Perkins School. And he's going to talk to you about all that he's done and all that he's doing currently. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome to everybody. You know what? I didn't prepare anything, but I'll just go through my, and I'll make this, as brief as possible so that I don't know if there's questions that goes on or.
We'll get to ask questions once you.
Yeah, so I'll just be brief because, like you said, a lot has gone on in my life from the June 9th, 1972, when I graduated from Perkins, which Dennis Brady brought to my attention that June 9th this year is on a Friday, which was when it was in 1972. So it'll be our 45th anniversary of graduation from Perkins. Interesting thing is I didn't have enough credits to go to college, right to college from Perkins. So as was the custom at Perkins, if you didn't have enough college credits, a policy which to this day I have to admit I still don't understand. You took a postgraduate year, and I'm going back to April of 1972 because that was a very significant day and month in my life because I was called into Mr. Davis's office. This was 2 months before graduation. And I went into Mr. Davis's office, who at that time was the head of guidance. And Mr. Davis informed me that I would not be coming back for Perkins for postgraduate year, that the school had been in talks with Fall River, specifically with Bishop Conley High School, and that I would be going to Bishop Conley High School after graduation from Perkins to take my postgraduate year there. That apparently this was after Chapter 766, which was passed in 1972. So myself and I think there was one other person. Well, Dennis Brady was the other person. We were both the first people under Chapter 766 to not come back to Perkins for postgraduate, but rather to go to a regular high school, and Dennis went to a public high school. I went to Bishop Conley in Fall River. So after graduation, I did the year at Bishop Conley, and then I went to Stonehill College, and my major was in political science, and I had two minors, psychology and religious studies, and the religious studies didn't occur until my sophomore year because I began to think about going into the Roman Catholic priesthood, specifically Holy Cross Fathers, which my uncle's a Holy Cross priest, and so I started to prepare for that possibility, but I didn't want to go right into the seminary. I thought I needed more time to think about what I was going to do with my priesthood, and what I thought I was going to do with my priesthood was work in campus ministry, or to work in a Catholic college administration similar to Stonehill. In fact, in my dream of dreams, I wanted to come back to Stonehill to work. So I went to Syracuse for my master's degree, and that was exciting because a couple of things happened. I decided that as a graduate student, I wanted to go for a resident assistant because I wanted to work very closely with students, and there were residence halls employed graduate resident assistants, and if you don't know what a resident assistant does, if you went to college, an RA is in charge of a floor of students. And it was a weird process because I never had to go through a face-to-face interview at Syracuse. I never, met with the residence life staff. I wrote a lengthy essay and I had a telephone interview, but I never had a face-to-face interview. So I thought that was strange because, number one, being blind, which I was out front about that. I wondered, and number two, they never had a blind resident assistant. The question on my mind was, do they know what they're doing? So, I was, my 2 years as in graduate studies, I was a pretty successful RA. I was in 2 different residence halls. 1 year was an all-freshman dorm floor, and that was my second year, and the first year was a mixture of mostly juniors and seniors, and that was kind of unexciting because juniors and seniors they don't want to stay in the residence hall. They want to go out with their friends and do other things and work off campus, and so that was kind of a very difficult floor to motivate. We resolved all the issues of fire alarms and how to evacuate the floor, and I worked out things with my floor. I appointed floor marshals, to assist with evacuation in case there were fire alarms, and and everything else. You just used a lot of your common sense. I had a lot of training as an RA. I went the summer before is when I went to I went to Syracuse. I started the summer before, and I just kind of took courses and just kind of learned the campus and mobility instructions and things like that, because I didn't want to do that in front of students. I thought that it set a poor message at the beginning of the year, to have your RA learn his way around the building at the same time freshman students, for example, were learning their way around. So I started the summer before. So after my Syracuse year and my master's in higher education administration, I started formal seminary training. I went to the University of Notre Dame for a candidate's year at the seminary at Notre Dame, and then I went to what's called a novitiate year, and that is the year that kind of makes or breaks you in terms of a religious order. It's a contemplative year, and I lasted a total of 6 weeks. So, having left the Congregation of Holy Cross, having left the community, I had to find a job, and that's where the job search began. And it took me about 11 months before I ended up as an assistant dorm director at North Adams State College. I'm trying to keep it brief, so I'm trying not to bore people here. So, as an assistant dorm director, it meant that I was responsible for training residence assistants. It also meant that I had to put together policy manuals for students that staffed the desk. The desks were staffed 24 hours a day. And when the dorm director was absent, I was the dorm director. So that presented some interesting issues because the president of the college at the time, without going into too much detail, had no idea that the residence life department had hired a blind assistant director. And he put the word out that I was not to be reappointed. Now, the only way I found this out was I filed a complaint against the particular institution when I wasn't reappointed. And that came out in the investigation that the president of the university of the college at the time had ordered that I not be reappointed. They couldn't have that kind of liability on their conscience. Mind you, I had been a successful assistant dorm director for an entire year. And so there were obviously no liability issues or anything that went wrong that year. It was a rather smooth year, in fact. So, having not been reappointed at North Adams, I just mentioned the name of the school. Well, this was many, many, many years ago, so I think nobody can come back and do anything now. But having not been reappointed to that particular school, it took me 15 more months of job search before I ended up at Framingham State. And the first 11 years, I trained resident assistants and I trained desk assistants, and then I became assistant ADA coordinator. And then in 1994, I was asked by the president of the college to establish the Disability Services Office. and I was the director there for 15 years until 2009 when I retired from Framingham State. So I worked at Framingham State for 26 years, and it was a very good experience. I really enjoyed working at Framingham State. Now, in my retirement, I am working for Community Autism Resources, which was founded by my sister in 1992, which deals with families and persons with autism spectrum disorder. The organization is 25 years old, in fact, next year, and serves 88 cities and towns in Massachusetts, and I am the publicity coordinator. It serves the South region, funded by the Massachusetts Department of Developmental Services, and I'm also chairman of the Fall River Commission on Disability. Besides my campus work, I helped start the Metro West Center for Independent Living in Framingham, directed the local affiliate of the radio reading service for 15 years, and I started the Framingham Commission on Disability and served as its chair for 7 years. And I had a year's break when I retired before I got back into the Disability Commission in Fall River. So that's kind of my brief thing, and I can kind of go on to things. I can elaborate more during the question and answer section, but that's kind of the Reader's Digest version.
Dennis,
and Bob, I have a question.
I just wanted to ask briefly, Dennis, and then I'm going to get to Alan. Aren't you also a church lector for a local Catholic church?
Oh, yeah, I am. I'm a lector in my parish every other Saturday night at the 6 o'clock Mass. I lector at my parish. All the readings are presented in Braille through the Xavier Society for the Blind.
Yeah, they send you the propers.
They send the propers, yep. So I read every other week. And
Great.
I've actually been lecturing since Stonehill College. So on and off, I would say, like probably around 40 years or so of lecturing.
Alan.
Hi, Dennis. Good to hear you again. It's been quite a while. It's strange that you mention Carl Davis when you had a problem coming back for postgraduate year and so forth. Carl also was my nemesis there at Perkins when it came time for students to hear about all the colleges that they had applied to and who was going where after their graduation. I never heard a thing, and come to find out, Carl Davis had recalled all my applications because he felt I was not the best spokesperson for Perkins because I was rather rowdy, I enjoyed partying, and he thought that the name of Perkins would be maligned by my college activities. So we ended up with a massive lawsuit against Perkins, and we ended up down we did. We ended up in fisticuffs between Carl Davis and myself, and Perkins had to pay me for all my money that went out. So I can empathize with your dilemma upon graduating to Perkins because I had to take a postgraduate year at South Burlington High School up here just to get into university.
I think the thing, a couple of things for me that because I didn't want to over monopolize the time, but what I left out is I was in the C division. Another policy at Perkins that didn't make much sense was the divisions, the A, B, C, and ungraded. And I think I think most people in this broadcast went to Perkins, right? Mm-hmm. So the A division, the B division, the C division, and the U division.
I don't remember the C division.
The C division was only up to the 8th grade. And then I had a choice to make. The choice I had to make was I either, work my rear end off and get into the B division, which would put me into 9B, in another stupid policy in Perkins, as you know, if you go to 9B, you repeat there's 9B, and then there's freshman year. So you repeated, in a sense, you kind of repeated the ninth grade over again. Yeah. So I had this choice to make, and I knew that I had failed courses like chair caning. I wasn't good with my hands. I was very good with my head. So I had some choices to make, and the person who really rode on me tough was Warren Germain. Warren Germain was my 8C teacher, 8th grade C division, and he just said, you just don't belong here. You shouldn't even be in 8C. So he worked me very, very hard to get into the B division, and then in my junior year, I went into the A division. Now, I don't understand. I still to this day don't understand the postgraduate, take an extra year. I don't know what that means. I think that I understand why you need so many credits to graduate from high school, but I never really could understand the philosophy of that postgraduate year. And the other thing I didn't like about the whole thing is the lack of consulting. I mean, I know that, at the time I was 20. I was a senior and probably should have been part of the decision-making process. I probably would have resisted because Perkins was comfortable. It was very, very comfortable, and I was student council president and, senior class vice president, and the year before I had been junior class president, and, you're kind of like big man on campus. I had the school record in track and field, in the broad jump, and the 3 consecutive broad jumps. So I knew I knew I was kind of, comfortable. So I probably would have resisted. But it wouldn't have gotten me anywhere because the law was the law. And at that time, if blindness was your only disability, then you were mainstreamed. That began the mainstreaming. So I kind of didn't like the fact that you go into Mr. Davis's office and it wasn't, how do you feel about this? It was, this is what's going to happen to you. Is that all making sense to people? Or?
Dennis,
yes, it does. When I first went to Perkins, Dennis, they put me in the B division automatically because I was newly blind. They didn't think that I could cope or handle college preparatory when I still had to learn orientation and mobility, Braille, and all the appropriate coping skills. I was in the B division, 8, 9, and then they were putting me in that 9B category that you mentioned. I was pissed off. I didn't want any part of it. All my friends were in A division, so I just went into the guidance department and I said, look, I realized when I came to Perkins, I ended up in B. I don't like it in B. I want A. And either I'm in A within 24 hours or I am quitting Perkins and I will go back to Vermont and go to public school. Perkins did not want me to go to public school because they wanted the money and the prestige of saying they had somebody from Vermont. So that afternoon, in the morning when I went in, that afternoon at 1 o'clock, I attended my first A division by telling the guidance department what was going to happen. Anyway, I'll shut my mouth and let other people talk to you, Dennis, but really good hearing from you.
Hi, Dennis.
Question, Bob.
Steve and then Jay. Go ahead, Steve.
Stephen Siebert, I'm sorry to hear how Perkins was back then when you left, but by the time I started in 68, and they were, well, Carl Davis was notwithstanding, but they were very good about us planning. Like you said, we had a student advisor. We discussed what we wanted in the future, so I was like, yeah, they called it college prep by then. It wasn't A and B, but C, but so I had a lot with the staff and the teachers, and we discussed realistic goals so I could go to college. So I'm really sorry to hear it was kind of screwed up like that. And what did you take in your postgraduate year that Perkins obviously didn't give you that you needed for college?
Good stuff. Political science. Didn't have political science at Perkins, although they had problems of democracy, and Mr. Norman LeBlanc taught that course, and I remember in 1970 when the United States invaded Cambodia.
Yeah.
We had a debate at Perkins, and I won the debate. I took the side against Nixon's decision to invade Cambodia, and again, it was a further testimony to Mr. LeBlanc and to other teachers that I was in the wrong division.
Yeah. But when you said you went to high school after Perkins, what did you take?
When I went to high school, I took political science. I took American and Russian politics. So those were two political science courses. I took algebra, and I took and Bishop Conley didn't really particularly care how well I fared. I think the idea was to get me accustomed to socialization in the sighted world after spending. Yeah.
But Perkins should have gave you algebra, but like you said, you didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So I took English, I took American and Russian politics, I took algebra, and those were the courses, and comparative government. So I took 5 courses, and for the first time, learning to do books on tape instead of in Braille, because you guys know if you took courses, English, or you took courses that everybody read the same books in Braille, and the pace is not as fast as in public school or Catholic schools. And I think I'm being diplomatic about that, but but it was I was learning how to use books on tape, and they were reel-to-reel tapes. So so I'm not the most mechanically inclined. So I was dealing with all these kinds of issues. Although I enjoyed Bishop Conley very, very much, I have to say, I really did.
Great, thanks.
Jay, you're next, Jay.
Dennis, obviously I observed you over the years in the organization that I first met you, and overall you always come across a very patient person. Obviously you are very decent. Most everybody that I know who know you, they very liked your manners. Now I can understand some of the patients of your background and all that stuff, because every task they asked you, you really did work hard and stay in course and did a good job. Now my question, I know you went to Syracuse and got your master's degree there. At what point, when did you decide that you wanted to go to priesthood, and what happened that you decided not to? Because, but to be honest with you, I could never picture you as a priest, because you're a funny guy. But at the meantime, you're serious but funny, and so I couldn't really picture you as a priest. So what went in your mind that you want to become a priest, and when did you decide against it?
After my year at Bishop Conley, actually. So I had it. I felt like I wanted to during the 4 years that I was at Stonehill College, and I didn't really begin exploring with Holy Cross until my junior year at Stonehill, and even I wasn't really connected with the community when I was in graduate school, because I was a resident assistant, but I hung out with campus ministry staff, and so it never really left me that that's what I would like to, that I'd like to do, and it's hard to say how much this was actual priesthood or how much of this was I actually wanted to work at Stonehill College. I don't know, but I was pretty serious. I mean, at that phase of my life, I was very serious about it. I stayed in touch with Holy Cross when I was at grad school at Syracuse. I went to Notre Dame for that year, and I think it hit me during the contemplative phase of that year. You go through what's called a novitiate, and that's when you study the religious community that you're entering. You study its constitutions, and there's a lot of quiet time, a lot of meditative time, and I have to tell you, that was very interesting because a lot of it was very embarrassing to me because a lot of my classmates in the novitiate, they would do these exercises like, they would have candles going and you had to quietly meditate, and then you had to describe what you were experiencing. And all my classmates had these they would say things like, honest to God, I didn't know whether I was watching Saturday Night Live or what, because they would tell you all these vivid things like, I see Jesus on the cross in front of me, and I have the nails. And I'm saying to myself, where are these people coming up with this stuff? And finally they called on me, and I'd say things like, well, I don't see anything. Of course, that led to a lot of laughter because people couldn't tell the difference between blind jokes or whatnot, but I was being very serious. Even in my mind's eye, I never had those kinds of experiences that my classmates were having. And so I actually went into depression because it just became, I finally figured out that maybe this isn't for me. This is not where I belong. And some of the characteristics and some of the things about ministry, I don't think I have to do this to be a priest to do this. I think I could just incorporate it into my daily life. So I left after 6 weeks, and I thought I might want to go back, but I didn't. And now I'm happily married. So.
No, obviously you did very well. You cooperated because you just come across that way as I know you for many, many years. Very decent guy. Dennis, now you mentioned my involvement with Catholic Church obviously started when I was at the Carroll Center getting the training. In those days, obviously, couldn't speak much English. And some of these nuns were interested in me, used to come and pick me up, take me to next door convent there for Mass, which I described them at breakfast time because they used to serve breakfast, and I used to hang around with these nuns, and obviously I enjoyed. They were young nuns, by the way, I mentioned. So when I used to come back to Carroll Center, there was Father Joe. Father Joe since passed away, God bless his soul. He used to ask me how was the Mass, and I used to describe all about the pancakes. And he used to get mad. He said, no, forget the breakfast. Then he used to tease me about the bacon and ham, and obviously they don't eat those things as a Muslim in those days. And he says, when you going to come to your senses and enjoy some of this ham and bacon? So anyway, he used to tease me. Finally, I said, Father Joe, I think I will have ham and bacon only on your wedding. So what is that going to be? And so they all got a big laugh at it. So we used to tease about it all the time. And these young nuns used to come and pick me up. And when they bring me back, they used to hug me. And I used to say, Father Joe, I enjoyed Sister Kathy. He said, remember, she's nun. And I didn't know what that was. I said, none of what? I like her. So obviously you incorporate that in your life. You really come across Dennis that way, and I really enjoyed you all those years that I worked with you, saw you in the organization and all that stuff. And to this day, you really have not, gone off course. So you stay on course. So God bless you, and I certainly good to hear from you.
Dennis, I have a question, and I've been looking for the answer to this question for years. And you may be able to shed some light on this from your perspective. You and I used to belong to a consumer organization. I think you know that. And, of course, at the time, we kept hearing how the unemployment rate of the blind was 70%. Now I'm hearing it's close to 80%. Well, it's 30 years later. How come the unemployment rate of the blind has not gone down despite what we think is a good effort on the part of consumer groups to lower it?
Boy, Bob, I wondered that myself. Is it up to 80 now? Wow. Well,
I'm hearing 80.
Yeah,
Who knows? But it's supposed to be going the other way.
Well, I think this is probably this is not probably, this is my opinion. It's not based on anything except experience, and I just think that the VR system, I don't know. I don't think they spend a lot of time marketing us, and the way they should. I personally didn't get very much, if any, support from the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind. Very little, actually, from the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind. The things that I would have wanted their support in, they seemed always hesitant to do that, and that would be in equipment. So I don't know, Bob, I don't know what the answer to the question is, except that it's, for me, it was always a question of marketing the abilities of blind people and marketing us to employment, and maybe spending less time on the counseling aspects of it and more time on providing money for equipment, technical assistance for equipment, even at some point maybe even paying for some of the equipment, and it's sort of helping the employers out in that sense, and spending more time on that and less time on, I don't know, what I call busy work, which is a lot of counseling probably, and telling you what you can't do in some cases and what you can do, and I'm not very high. I'm still not very high on the vocational rehabilitation system.
Excuse.
I mean, that would probably be the short answer to the question. I don't know why it's still 72 to 80%. I know it's one of the few aggregates of the Americans with Disabilities Act that doesn't seem to have taken shape yet, even after 25 years. And I know that a lot of VR people are making a lot of money off of us. So.
Oh yeah.
Jeff.
Yeah, I was going to say the bottom line, and they never tell you this. They open your case to close your case.
Yeah.
That's a comment, and that whenever we have, I mean, this is the experience I had, Dennis. I mean, you knew that I did go into Braille proofreading, and the trick of that is, don't let them persuade you.
Yeah.
They try to tell you, this, but one complaint you get from them is, you blind people don't appreciate what we're trying to do. I mean, no, how can we have just as much right as everybody else to do what we want to do, not what they want us to do.
But Dennis,
in Massachusetts, we had a commission for the blind who didn't even want to support library services.
Yeah.
And that's why we had that big fight to bring it over under the Board of Library Commissioners, because we got better attention under a Board of Library Commissioners than under the agency that's supposed to serve the blind. So, it's not a it's a system that's really, I think, still broken.
It's bureaucratic. Dennis, you did it back in any time, but you just basically advocated for yourself. Like when they didn't reappoint you, and you were probably the only blind person there, I'm assuming. And you just basically didn't play the blind card. You just said, I'm here to work, and it wasn't probably a big issue most of the time, and you just were you.
In both of my works as a resident assistant at Syracuse and at the college where I served as an assistant residence hall director, I was the first. They had never had. And you're right. I wanted to. I always made sure that I got started before everybody got there or whatever. And and the only time I really discussed my disability was when I wasn't reappointed. And that's because I thought I smelled something fishy about that, because
Yeah.
it seemed rather strange that all of a sudden I wouldn't be reappointed. And I also felt in my mind that I had a good case. And
Yeah, I guess. So you said you told them you were blind before you had the interview?
Yes, I did, but I didn't spend a lot of time discussing it.
Right. But you did disclosure.
In my interviews, I always, because it's obvious. You go in there with a white cane. I mean, there's no way to hide it. You know. So I just said, let's put it out there, because I know the questions, and I wanted them to have a frank discussion about how would I deal with fire alarms, or how would I deal with some of the issues that a resident director in a residence hall or a resident advisor in charge of a floor of students. I knew these questions were going to come up. So let's get the blindness thing out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it on the table, and then let's talk about the issues that the job requires.
Mm-hmm.
Good
Bob?
job.
Anyone else?
Yes, Bob?
Don.
Yes, Bob. Thank you. Dennis, this is Donald Bowden from Worcester. It's good to hear your voice. We were roommates in Moulton Cottage.
I know.
And I've a debt of gratitude to you and Stephen Barron. But when I was partially sighted when we were roommates, and I lost the rest of my vision. And you and Stephen and a lot of other students, but were very supportive of me and helped me out in a lot of ways. And I will never forget that. I will never forget that. Now, you mentioned Holy Cross. Now I live in Worcester, so I know, Holy Cross. Did you attend Holy Cross at all?
No, let me explain. Holy Cross College, it wasn't Holy Cross College. It's a religious order called the Holy Cross Fathers. They run the University of Notre Dame.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
they run the University of Notre Dame, among other schools.
Okay.
So, that's a very common mistake, actually. So
right. Thank you.
You're among millions.
Yeah.
Holy Cross College in Worcester, it's called the College of the Holy Cross. I didn't know that until I went to a professional conference there, and somebody said, it's the College of the Holy Cross, to which I said, well, excuse me. but Holy Cross College is run by the Jesuits, actually, in Worcester.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You say you took political science. I hear there's a lot of reading in that kind of course.
There is. I majored in it. It was my undergraduate degree is in political science. And there's a lot of reading. I was always interested in politics.
Mm-hmm.
Even going back to Perkins.
Me too.
I was on the student council. Yep.
Yeah.
You're still interested in politics after this election? Really interesting, huh?
Yeah, I am.
Donald.
Yep.
The real Donald Trump.
Yes. Well, it's good to hear you again, Dennis.
Yeah.
Good to hear you, too.
I forgot what Dennis's number was anyway, but
Any other questions for Dennis?
Yes, this is Karen Crowder, and you might remember me. I used to be Karen Glazebrook at Perkins, and I remember you meeting you and your wife when I went to the NFB convention in Chicago in 1988.
Yep.
And the late Dan Murphy, and I remember going to a meeting.
Oh my God! I'm still dealing with that one.
Anyways, I know it's hard, but anyways, one thing I wanted to ask was, how is your wife? And two, another thing is, what were some of your responsibilities as a dorm supervisor? What were some of your responsibilities there? And I just want to say, I went to the Worcester Cathedral this year because I now live in Leominster, and the church I go to, the priest invited us, me and my friend Claire, You might remember hers because she was Claire the Queer. She's Claire Rand. She was married.
Okay.
And we both went to a Holy Week Mass there in Worcester. It was very nice.
Yeah.
At the cathedral.
Well, first of all, my wife's doing very well. She has multiple sclerosis. She's had it since 1994. 1993.
Oh, that must be tough.
She's doing.
Or is she doing pretty well with it?
Well with it. I mean, yeah, she's doing pretty well with it. She's been on. She was one of the first people to, when the beta seron medication came out in 1994. She was one of the first people to get on that medication. And
okay.
you know, she has the days when she's really, really tired. So we pace ourselves, but she's doing very well with it still.
Oh, that's wonderful because
you just take it each day at a time.
Yeah.
But she's had it since 1993. Now I was an assistant dorm director, and on the weekends, and my boss was away a lot on weekends. She was preparing to get married, so she was away a lot on the weekends, which meant that I had charge of the building. There were about 500 students, and there were about 16 RAs, resident assistants.
Yeah.
So my responsibilities were, and also we had our main desk had to be staffed by students, work-study students, and then from midnight. So I had to make sure, my main responsibility was to make sure that desk was staffed from 8 o'clock in the morning till midnight, when the campus police had what they call residence hall security officers were in charge of the building, in charge of the security. So what I would do is I trained the desk workers. I wrote a policy manual for them to go by, basically answering phones and making sure people checked ID cards when they wanted to get equipment.
Oh, yeah.
It was each residence hall had like gym equipment that you can use, or ping pong balls or things like that games that they wanted to play. So they had to have they had to leave their meal card at the desk. So I had to make sure that that students were trained to do that. I also worked with the resident assistants, reminding them of their responsibilities on the floor, with the students that they were responsible for. Each floor had to have educational programs, so I used to help out with how to do that, how to book speakers for their floors. So it was you were on call basically 24 hours a day. I mean, many times I was awakened in the middle of the night to do certain things. So, the things that I didn't like about it were, of course, the disciplinary things. I had to write up incident reports. When I was at Framingham State, I was a judicial hearing officer, which meant that I had to hear the cases and then decide whether a student should be suspended from campus or from the residence halls or whatnot. So those are the kinds of things that I was doing.
It sounds to me, Dennis, like you were very good at communicating because, you didn't let your blindness get in the way, and you obviously had to work with sighted people and say, I need help, like either, you know what I mean? You obviously just did your job and said, hey, I'm sure you had a good team with you because, it's good that people were working with you and not saying, oh, this is a blind guy, you can't do that.
We had a great team, Steve, and I had especially my second year at Syracuse as a resident assistant, I had a predominantly freshman floor. One of my students that I still hear a lot from, sometimes I keep in touch with him, his name is Michael Goldstein, and he runs the Empire. You may hear the commercials on radio, Empire Loan. It's like it's a pawn store where they. Yeah. So he owns that. Wow. He owns that. His name is Michael Goldstein, and he was one of my students when I was his RA at Syracuse, and he was very politically active, like I was. I had a very politically active floor that year. I don't know who they got that from, but
was the early 70s. It was very active.
It was 1980 actually.
I'm sorry. Well, that was pretty. There was always something going on.
1979. So you're not that. It was the end of the 70s. So my floor, for example, they threw out the president and vice president of dorm council. So you. But it was with issues like fire alarms, for example, and I keep mentioning that because that's the big issue that everybody gets stuck on. Mm-hmm. How do you evacuate your floor? I had floor marshals, and they were very good. These were students who were willing to step in and help out and make sure that their surrounding rooms were responded when there was a fire alarm. I would go in and swish my cane around the room, under the beds, in case anybody was hiding there, check the closets, so I mean, they were very helpful with that. And the same thing with the students at the college where I was an assistant dorm director. I had very good rapport with students. I had very good rapport with the resident advisors, with the other RAs, and you're right, Steve. That's very, very important. You have to be able. They have to be able to trust you, myself, and that rapport was very important. And you have to, you have to be afraid. Even sighted people, you have to be afraid not to ask for assistance. I mean, your job. Those kinds of jobs are not going to be successful unless you get other people involved in it. Don't be autocratic in your style. I don't think I had an autocratic style in running the floor. And you're not going to be successful unless you involve other people and make it like your floor. Our big thing when as RAs was that you were kind of building community on your floor, especially where you were dealing with freshman students who were away from home. And they were experiencing for the first time sharing restroom facilities, things like that. Maybe they came from small families, one or two kids in the family. They didn't have to share as much as you do in a floor where there's about 25, 30 kids on your floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know what that's like at Perkins and other places. Sure.
Yeah. But you know what, you guys? I think that's. I have to say, I think that's where the Perkins experience really helps. The cottage experience, especially when we were there. The cottage, I don't think cottage living now is the same as it used to be.
No.
I think do they still eat in their cottage dining rooms like we used to?
I don't know. I think some of them they do. I would hope.
It still has a central kitchen now.
That's my impression.
Yeah, but
I don't know if there's any recent alumni, recent graduates that can help me out with this, but
that's true. Yeah, I don't know.
Do they still have, the dining rooms in their own cottages? And
I know some of the cottages have dining rooms. At least last I knew.
Hi, this is Marcy.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Marcy.
Yeah, Steve and I, we go to book club, and we usually go early and we investigate the place, and we go and say, hey, we're from alumni, and we poke around and we look at things, and we actually try to break into one of the cottages to look around. And it was interesting because in between two cottages, which I think it was Glover and Bradley.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Glover and Potter. They have a dining room, which was kind of like what used to be the gym, and it's like they share the it's like cafeteria style.
But they don't
and she wouldn't let me look in.
Oh, I think they still have. I think the upper school though they still have the dining room. So
I don't know, but I know lower school has very few students.
Yeah, there's very few students in lower school. In upper school, half the cottages are closed.
Yep.
Steve and I
but the
looked at that.
Still open.
Boys' side is closed, yeah.
Yeah.
Some are open, though.
I think that kind of cottage living is what helped in terms of running a floor.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
You know, because we were already doing things that college students were learning to do for the first time. We've already
kind of our age at Perkins were house parents. I like the house mother and house father at Perkins. It kind of made you feel welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, welcome. Home sister. I mean, I was a day student, but still, where I didn't have a mother, it was nice to go to a woman and talk to her if you needed something.
Right.
So, I mean, that was a good bonding. But now they have 3 people to a person now if you go on campus.
You know, they need a lot more work, like multi-handicap, like 1 for each shift.
Yeah.
Like 7 to 3, then 3 to 11, then 11 to 7.
But every month, Steve and I, we investigate a part of the campus. I don't know where we're going to next time.
Anybody else for a question? We have time for 2 more, I think.
I'll see it, bye.
Well, this is Lauren, and I never went to Perkins, and I'm not from Massachusetts, but I called in because I wanted to hear what you had to say, and I was very interested in everything you were talking about. And I do have family up in Massachusetts. As a matter of fact, my little niece made her first Holy Communion this weekend, and they live in Westboro, Massachusetts. I don't know what church they go to there, but that's where they live. And I have other family in Worcester and in Northborough.
That's right up around where I spent a lot of my my working career, around the Metro West area. Westboro is not too far from Framingham.
Right.
I've spent time on Westboro State Hospital's Human Rights Committee.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
That's where they live.
I have another question.
Darren?
Dennis, how did you find the transportation in the Framingham area? Now, I know somebody who lived there. She lived in Framingham, and you could get the ride and stuff, but how did you find the transportation generally?
When I first started, it was lousy. In 1983, as a matter of fact, the organization that I belonged to, was called the Greater Framingham Association of Disabled Citizens, and eventually it mushroomed into the Metro West Center for Independent Living. I was president of GFA, and during that time is when we worked with the MBTA to bring the ride out to Framingham. Framingham and Natick, and believe me, anybody that says, you know, you don't have a good paratransit program, why are we spending all this money on a good paratransit program when I very rarely see people in wheelchairs come out? Honest to God, we had a judge in Framingham who said, his name was Tony Colonna, the late Tony Colonna. He was a long-time worker in the court system in Framingham, and he argued. He was also the DPW director. I couldn't believe this, but he argued that we shouldn't be spending all these money on curb cuts because I never see people in wheelchairs out in the streets. And I mean, you know, the crazy thing about it, of course, you didn't see them out because they couldn't cross streets and they couldn't use the streets because there were no curb cuts. And one of the things that happened, the Framingham Disability Commission and the Natick Commission on Disability came into existence once the ride came out to Framingham, because people could be out till from 6 in the morning to 1 in the morning. But then this thing, when I retired in 2009, this thing called the Metro West Transit Authority was formed.
Oh, yes.
And the good thing about it is that more people could take the transportation in towns like Ashland, Hopkinton, Holliston, Wayland. Those towns had lousy transportation systems because they weren't covered by the ride. And once the MWRTA was formed, their transportation situation got better, while Framingham and Natick got back to sunrise to sunset kind of transportation services. Still better than when I first started in 1983, because at least they had, paratransit services, but it wasn't the 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. that it was from about 1986 to about 2010. Mm-hmm. So right now I would say the transportation is not as good as it was in 1986, but it's better than the transportation system that I'm now in Fall River, which is like sunrise to sunset.
Mm-hmm. For the record, Dennis's transportation in Fall River is similar to mine.
Yeah.
We have, we'll call it ride service here.
Yeah.
It's like from 6 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. weekdays, and maybe 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Saturdays, and 9 to 5 approximately on Sundays.
When I was being
you're lucky you've got Sunday transportation. We don't.
I don't have Sunday down here.
I don't know why, but we don't. We never have.
When I was being honored by the Board of Selectmen at Framingham when I retired, I said to them that from a transportation standpoint, I'm going from riches to rags. Because at that time it was 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. and I knew that I'm glad I'm in Fall River with my family and all, but I knew that I was going to go to a transportation system that wasn't as good as what I had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, one last question.
One more question. Since you study political science, obviously you've been to organization and you know grassroots. Have you ever thought about running for office in politics, local or national?
You know what, Jolio? No. I'm the chairman of the Fall River Commission on Disability, and to me that's about as political as I want to get. Although I don't mind. I do study the city politics very, very carefully. We have a mayor now who's 25 years old, which I think is much too young to be mayor of a city of 88,000 people. But but as for running for anything, no, I don't think I want to go through that.
Well, you are retired after all.
That's okay. Look, we have a city councilor who's about my age, maybe even a little older, who's going to run for mayor, and I think she's going to be a good mayor if she gets it. She's the person I'll probably be voting for.
All right. Well,
thank you, Dennis.
I want to take this opportunity to thank you for being with us this evening, and continued success with all that you're continually doing to help others.
Thank you, guys. I hope it wasn't boring or anything.
Oh, no, not at all.
No, not at all.
Very interesting, Dennis. Very interesting.
Okay. Take care. God bless. Have a great one.
Yep.